On the 60th anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, I spent 2 weeks in Japan with American University's Nuclear Studies Institute. It was an unforgettable journey that included several visits with Hibakusha, which is the term used to describe survivors of the bomb. When I spoke at a university in Kyoto, a woman who had been a baby when the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima came to me in tears afterwards to tell me I was an American Hibakusha. I'd never thought of myself that way, but that day I realized that I too am a Hibakusha. I am a survivor of the atomic bombs exploded on American soil by my own government. Radioactive fallout from 4 decades of nuclear testing left a devastating legacy, not only in my home state of Utah, which is directly downwind of the test site, but across the entire United States. We were victims of the deadly winds of the Cold War. My name is Mary Dickson, and I am a downwinder. Like countless other Americans, I grew up under the clouds of fallout from nuclear testing. My life and my work have been shaped by what happened to me and so many of the people I love at the hands of our own government, all in the guise of protecting us. Between 1951 and 1992, the U.S. government exploded 935 nuclear bombs, each more powerful than the ones that leveled Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Those tests, conducted in the desert of Nevada, not far from Las Vegas, put unsuspecting Americans in harm's way. When atmospheric testing was banned in 1992, the tests were moved underground, but many of them leaked, sometimes spewing visible mushroom clouds into the atmosphere. I carry this credit card-sized map of the United States in my wallet. It's from Richard Miller's book, Under the Clouds, the Decades of Nuclear Testing, and it shows where the winds carried radioactive fallout from Nevada. Utah and Nevada are almost completely blacked out, and the black heat spreads as far as New York and as far north as Canada, the black blotting out areas across the entire country, including those in the Midwest, where most of our nation's food is grown. Radiation did not respect arbitrary lines on a map. It was picked up by the jet stream and carried across the country, where it fell to the ground in rain and snow and worked its way into the food chain. That's how it reached and was measured in Salt Lake City, the Midwest, and in upstate New York, 2,300 miles from the test site. That's how in 1950 test they named Simon collided with the worst thunderstorm in 100 years and doused Albany, Troy, and Schenectady. Researchers at the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute measured radiation in the water gushing down the rain spouts and flooding playgrounds. It's how radioactive fallout was carried to Los Angeles in 1958, where it was trapped in an inversion for days when the winds suddenly shifted. I have shown Miller's map to people around the country, and they're always shocked. They had no idea that fallout spread so far, crossing over their cities and towns. I carry his map to bear witness and to make sure that nuclear testing is never resumed. I don't need reminders of what fallout did to the people living in those areas of black on Miller's map. There is another map I carry. It's the one drawn by scars on my body. The earth shifted for me in the spring before my 30th birthday when I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. My world lost its predictability with 2 words. It's malignant. In subsequent years, I underwent a radical hysterectomy, likely another result of radiation exposure. I grew up drinking milk from a nearby dairy, eating fresh vegetables from the garden, mixing sugar with snow to pretend it was ice cream, and playing in puddles of rainwater. How were any of us to know that a silent poison was threading its way through our bodies when our government repeatedly assured us there is no danger? They gave us pamphlets assuring us that some of you have been inconvenienced by our test operations. telling us not to let reports of Geiger counters going crazy bother us, and encouraging us to watch the blast as a family activity. How were we to know that the radioactive debris in those awe-inspiring, towering mushroom clouds would devastate families and communities across America? When the fallout drifted across the skies, no sirens rang out to signal the danger. We blithely went about our lives assuming we were safe. We trusted a government that assured us we had nothing to fear. After I got sick, I began keeping a list of friends and neighbors who had cancer and autoimmune diseases. My list includes 54 people who lived near my childhood home on Canyon's Rim in Salt Lake City. In 2001, I added my sister's name. She died at age 46 after a long struggle with an autoimmune disease, leaving 3 children behind. Now, my younger sister is battling a rare cancer. Growing up, we thought cancer and tumors were just a fact of life. Where I'm from, my story is not unusual. Other people keep similar lists, and our lists continue to grow. Sometimes I feel like I am forever piling up losses. Friends, coworkers, relatives, and allies I've worked with on the issue for decades. The more I write and speak out, the more people come to me with their stories. The woman who told me about the day as a young bride she was brushing her hair and it fell into the sink with a chunk of her scalp. After years of being dismissed by doctors as having housewife syndrome, a specialist finally diagnosed her with spontaneous immune system failure, a disease he told her was likely related to radiation exposure, but he said he would deny it if she told anyone. I've heard endless tales of sickness and suffering, of children born with birth defects, of too many deaths. The stories are heartbreaking, but there is power in them. The stories are our most powerful tool. In 2007, I wrote a very personal play titled Exposed that weaves my story with what I've learned. It ended with a somber reading of my list of the dead. After each performance, the cast invited audience members to add names of downwinders on a wall outside the theater. In just a few nights, so many names had been added that we had no room left on the wall. What's hard to reconcile is that our government knew the facts about fallout, about contaminated milk, about the susceptibility of children, and that they lied to us. Declassified minutes of the Atomic Energy Commission confirmed that the government misled us from the beginning, systematically covered up the facts, and knowingly endangered us. In the early years of testing, when one AEC commissioner expressed concerns over reports of livestock and people dying, another commissioner responded, "Nothing is going to get in the way of testing, nothing," and suggested that what was needed was a judicious handling of public information. Our government deemed us expendable, which is why it outrages me that this administration, which I doubt knows the staggering human cost of our nuclear past, is considering resuming testing. And for what? There's no military purpose. We already possess the most powerful nuclear arsenal in the world. The president's budget for the next year proposes a 19% increase for nuclear weapons. The Senate version of the National Defense Authorization Act includes $10 million to prepare for an explosive nuclear test. A Department of Defense official has said such a test could be conducted within months if ordered. This is utterly immoral, given what we know. Fortunately, there are those who understand the lingering trauma of nuclear testing, and they've introduced bills in the House and Senate to prohibit the use of funds for new nuclear tests. My own Congressman, Ben McAdams, successfully pushed House leaders to put language in next year's spending bills prohibiting the use of funds for test site readiness. Ironically, discussions of resumed nuclear testing come at the same time that bills have been introduced in Congress to expand the very limited Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, which currently offers qualified downwinders in a small circle of rural counties in Utah, Nevada, and Arizona $50,000. Those funds are set to run out in 2021. Downwinders have waited too long for justice. Barbara Rose Johnston, in her book Half-Lives and Half-Truths, says that the arms race did not prevent nuclear war. Rather, it was a nuclear war. Those of us who have survived that undeclared war are walking witnesses of radiation's effects. The human costs of testing haven't ended. People are still getting sick. Their cancers are returning. Other health complications are showing up. In addition, the genetic damage could affect new generations. We are still living with fallout. Today, we face a global pandemic that has claimed more than 147,000 lives in this country alone at the time of this recording. Fallout from nuclear testing claimed far more. But when that silent killer was attacking us, no one warned us, and wearing a mask would not have saved us. Had downwinders become ill or died immediately following those explosions in the Nevada desert, the numbers would have been considered a national catastrophe. But because health effects can take 10, 20, 40 years to appear, they're easy to dismiss. Sadly, the vast majority of downwinders will never know they were casualties of testing. And just as sadly, the burden of proof always rests on the victims. Science demands conclusive evidence. We have the undeniable evidence of our experience, but we also have the science showing the health effects. A 15-year study by the National Cancer Institute released in 1997 concluded that radioactive iodine-131 from atmospheric testing fell on virtually every county in the continental United States. That study estimated that 212,000 lifetime cases of thyroid cancer alone may be linked to fallout. Keep in mind, that's just one form of fallout-related cancer. More recently, a March 2019 study published in the Journal of Economic History concluded that 500,000 Americans, many of them in central and eastern states, likely died due to fallout-contaminated agriculture. When we look at nuclear testing worldwide, the number of people who have been affected becomes mind-boggling. How many families and communities around the world have piled up losses? The story of nuclear testing and its consequences is not included in American history books, nor is it generally known by the public. I would venture that most Americans, and that includes elected representatives, don't know the full story of testing. After lobbying Congress with other women, it became very apparent to me that our lawmakers know very little about this chapter of American history. It's no wonder the writer Gore Vidal likes to say that we are the United States of amnesia. Too many of us have become ill, and too many of us have had to bury the dead. I've been sliced, scooped out, and radiated. I've watched my sister take her last breath in agony. So many of the downwinders I worked with who dedicated their lives to keeping the story alive are dying off. Who will serve as witnesses when we are gone? On this 75th anniversary of America's bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, may those of us from nations around the globe who know firsthand the tragedy of nuclear weapons stand together to demand that the mistakes of the past never be repeated. May we do all we can to ensure that no government ever again sacrifices innocent human beings to nuclear weapons. If we learn anything from being the unwitting subjects of a misbegotten program of atomic testing, it is that we are all downwinders. We are all Hibakusha.